She's sitting in a waiting room and her tail is going like a metronome someone forgot to switch off. A stranger crouches down, smiles, reaches out a hand, and in the half second before anyone can stop it, the dog snaps. The room goes quiet. The stranger pulls back, stunned, holding their wrist, and the first words out of their mouth are the same 4 words we've all said at some point in our lives. But she was wagging. Here's the part nobody in that room understands. The dog wasn't lying. She wasn't pretending to be friendly and then changing her mind. Every single signal she gave was completely honest. We were the ones reading it wrong, because almost everything we were ever taught about that motion is incomplete. A wagging tail was never a smile stitched onto the back end of a dog. It's closer to a needle on a gauge, one that only measures how hard something is hitting your dog's nervous system in that exact moment. It doesn't know the difference between joy and threat. It was never built to. Stay with that for a second, because it rewires almost everything you think you've seen on camera 1,000 times. Picture the needle on a car's tachometer, the one that climbs when you hit the gas. It doesn't tell you if you're speeding toward a party or away from a crash. It just tells you the engine is working harder than it was a moment ago. Your dog's tail runs on almost the same logic. The muscles at the base of it are wired straight into the part of the nervous system that handles arousal, the same wiring that speeds up a heartbeat or widens a pupil. None of that is something a dog decides to do. It's something that happens to them. That's the detail that changes everything. A human smile is something we can choose to perform even when we don't mean it. A dog's tail was never built for performance. It's closer to a pulse you can see from across a room, and pulses don't lie about being calm when they're not. So if the tail is just measuring intensity, and not the emotion behind it, how does anyone ever tell a happy dog from a dangerous one? This is where most explanations stop, right at the surface, and it's exactly where the real story starts. Watch closely enough, and the needle isn't just moving fast or slow. It's sitting at a height, holding a stiffness, tracing a shape, and every one of those details is a separate readout layered on top of the last one. Height comes first. A tail carried low, maybe even folded beneath the body, is a dog telling you it feels small in this moment, that it's bracing for something rather than reaching toward it. A tail held level with the spine, moving in loose, wide sweeps, belongs to a dog whose whole body has essentially unclenched. And a tail raised high isn't automatically a warning sign either. High can mean total confidence in a dog greeting an old friend. It can also mean a dog squaring up to something it doesn't trust. Height alone never finishes the sentence. Then there's the texture of the movement itself, and this is the layer almost everyone misses. A loose tail swings like it's hanging off a body with nothing to prove. A stiff tail vibrates more than it swings, short and sharp like a spring wound too tight to move freely. That stiffness is the dog's whole nervous system holding its breath, and it's very often the exact signal that gets misread as friendliness by someone crouching down with an outstretched hand. Which brings us back to that waiting room, because that stranger did read a signal correctly. They just read the wrong half of it. The dog was wagging fast and wagging high, but it was also wagging stiff, tight, almost vibrating rather than swinging. That combination isn't excitement. It's a nervous system running hot with nowhere to release the pressure, and the outstretched hand became the release valve. There's a version of this same misunderstanding playing out in almost every park, every front porch, every reunion caught on a doorbell camera. And once you start noticing stiffness versus looseness, you can't unsee it. It becomes the difference between reading your dog and just watching your dog. But height and stiffness are still only describing how loud the signal is. They still can't tell you what's actually being said. And that answer turns out to live somewhere far stranger than anyone expected, hiding inside which side of the body the tail leans toward. Researchers studying this notice something that sounds almost too strange to be real at first. When dogs see something they want, their tail doesn't wag evenly. It drifts, ever so slightly toward their own right side. When they're faced with something that unsettles them, the drift shifts toward their own left. Most owners have never consciously registered this in their own dog, because the tilt is subtle enough to miss unless you're specifically looking for it. The reason has nothing to do with preference and everything to do with wiring. Picture 2 separate engineers, one running each side of the brain, each one plugged into the opposite side of the body. The engineer on the left hemisphere handles approach, curiosity, the pull towards something good, and that hemisphere happens to control the right side of the tail. The engineer on the right hemisphere handles withdrawal, caution, the instinct to protect against something threatening, and that one controls the left side. Whichever engineer is working harder in that instant is the one that ends up steering the tail, tilting the whole thing subtly in its own direction. Which means somewhere behind a dog's calm, wagging exterior, there are two competing signals being broadcast at once, and the direction of the lean is the tiebreaker deciding which one wins. Here's where it gets even stranger. Dogs can see this in each other. Show a dog footage of another dog wagging with a rightward lean, and its heart rate barely moves. Show that same dog footage of a leftward lean, and its heart rate climbs, its posture tightens, even though nothing else in the video changed. Somewhere across millions of years, dogs built an entire silent language around a signal so small that most humans have spent their whole lives standing right next to it without ever noticing it exists. So the tail isn't one signal. It's four, all layered on top of each other at once. How high it sits, how loose or stiff the motion is, how fast the needle is climbing, and which way the whole thing quietly leans. Read only one of those and you're catching a single word in the middle of a sentence. Read all four together, and the dog has been talking to you the entire time. There's one wag that breaks every rule described so far, and it's the one most owners would swear is the purest expression of joy they've ever witnessed. Call it the full-body wag, the one where the motion doesn't stay contained to the tail at all. It starts at the shoulders and rolls backward through the spine until the entire back half of the dog is swinging in one continuous wave, sometimes bending the body into something close to a crescent. This is the one wag that almost never gets misread, because it isn't stiff, it isn't guarded, and it isn't measuring caution in any direction. It shows up almost exclusively for the people and animals a dog already trusts completely, which is exactly why it feels so different standing on the receiving end of it. You're not watching a nervous system spike. You're watching one relax so completely that the relaxation spills out past the tail and takes the whole body with it. There's another wrinkle to all of this that almost never comes up, and it explains why some dogs seem to misread each other constantly while others never do. This entire language has to be learned. A puppy isn't born fluent in tail signals any more than a human infant is born reading facial expressions. Litters spend weeks bumping into each other, testing signals, watching how a stiff wag from a littermate gets answered with a growl or a play bow, slowly building a working vocabulary through nothing but trial and error. Dogs raised in isolation from other dogs during those early weeks often grow up fluent in almost nothing, unable to read a stiff tail as a warning or a loose one as an invitation, which is part of why some adult dogs seem to walk straight into conflicts that any well-socialized dog would have avoided 3 signals earlier. And there's a whole category of dogs the rest of the pack sometimes struggles to read at all, simply because part of their vocabulary was removed before they ever had a chance to use it. Breeds with naturally short or surgically docked tails are missing a large portion of the exact instrument every other dog is straining to interpret. Height, lean, and stiffness all compressed into a few inches instead of a full limb's worth of motion. Other dogs often approach them more cautiously at first, not because anything is wrong, but because half the sentence they're used to reading has effectively gone missing, and that difference matters far beyond satisfying curiosity. Shelters and rescue groups have started training staff to look past the wag itself and study the whole picture, because relying on tail motion alone to judge whether a dog is approachable has led to real injuries, the exact kind that played out in that waiting room. A wagging tail was never a green light on its own. It was always one word inside a much longer sentence, and for most of history, humans have only been catching the last syllable, which is what makes the ending of this so much bigger than one gauge, one hemisphere, one wag. Somewhere in the last several thousand years, as wolves drifted closer to human fires and eventually became the dogs curled up on our couches, that involuntary little needle became something else entirely. It became a bridge. A species without our language found a way to hand us a live readout of exactly what's happening inside them, swinging in the open for anyone willing to actually look. So go back to that waiting room one more time. The dog wasn't confused, and she wasn't lying. Her body was doing exactly what it evolved to do, broadcasting the truth in real time through height and stiffness and speed and the smallest possible lean to one side. The only thing missing that day was someone who knew how to listen. And the next time you watch your own dog's tail lift the moment your key hits the lock, you'll see it differently. Not a smile, not a switch flipped to happy. A living needle, swinging wide and loose and unguarded, telling you in the only language it has ever known that right now, in this exact second, everything in its world just settled.